So I am doing this as a keynote in a couple of weeks in Arizona. And so I reached out to Jerry and asked, hey, do you know anybody that might be willing to host so I can get in front of some people that won't heckle me? To go through the presentation, to work through my timing and to see if what I think is funny, you think is funny, those kinds of things. And so thank you for being here to witness the first go with this. Let me see, make sure this works here. Okay, good. We're just going to leave it on that circle for a minute. So, and thanks, Jerry. Thank you, Cesslock, for hosting. I appreciate it very much. So I spent my first 22 years with one organization in Mesa, Arizona. I came here about a year and a half ago, so I haven't been here for too long. But it was about probably 6 years ago or so that I started really thinking about the company you keep and influence and those kinds of things. And I started looking at people like they were a puzzle and I was a puzzle. And so I started looking at myself and saying, you know, I have a lot of good pieces, but I'm missing a couple really critical things in leadership, in my leadership wheel. And then I started looking at other people and I was like, ooh, you're good. You have this, like you have really locked this down and I'm missing that. And I need that from you. I need to take that piece and put that here. And so you're going to mentor me and you didn't even know you were going to mentor me. Like I'm going to force you, like almost kidnapping, but not quite. So I did. I would go to people and I would start with what everybody loves, which is a compliment. And I would say, man, you are so good at that. Like I have watched you. I've watched you in meetings. I've watched you around people. And you've mastered this and I'm missing it. I'm really, really weak here. So would you mind spending some time with me and working with me so that I can get that from you? And what do you think people said? Absolutely, of course. Who doesn't love a compliment, right? And so it started out like that, where I was really looking at people like that. And so by the end of that 6 years, I had surrounded myself with a really great group of people, really across all boundaries, not just in law enforcement. There were some in law enforcement, there were some in private sector, there were young, there were older, there were a huge mix of people. So important to surround yourself with diversity. Diversity of thought is really, really important. So I surrounded myself with this great group of people, and they helped me through all kinds of things. They helped me with lateral transfers, they helped me with personnel issues, with personal issues, and they helped me when I was getting ready to test for commander. I called that group up. It's a super competitive process. There was about probably 13 people or so testing for what would maybe be 2 positions. And so I knew, walking into that process, that when I left those oral board panels, those people had to have one choice. And their only choice was to promote me. That was it. I knew that. I knew that that was all I could do. Or I wasn't going to get promoted. And the people I was competing against were super competitive, very, very good candidates also. So I started looking at myself, and I suffer from a bit of overconfidence, which is a problem. It's a real problem. When I look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I'm perfect. My city manager, my poor city manager, she calls me and she's like, hey, how was that community meeting? I'm like, I killed it. That's always my answer to everything, is I killed it. She's like, well, you might not have killed it exactly. I did get one kind of complaint. So I'm like, what? That person, they don't even know what they're talking about. That's crazy. 1 out of 100. Who's not going to get 1 out of 100? I still killed it, right? So it's a problem. So I called this group up and I said, hey, I need some help. I need to practice. I need you to help me go through an oral board, mock oral board. So I told them all, I said, hey, put together 3 questions. So it's 3 panels, 1 employee panel, 1 community panel, and 1 executive staff panel. So I said, put 3 questions together as if you were on each of those panels. And then let's get together. So we did. We got in a room just like this. We had a camera. And I'm like, fire away. So boom, they start firing questions at me. And pretty soon they're like, don't purse your lips like that when you're thinking. And they're like, don't look up and left. Quit looking out the window. Don't answer that question like that. And I was like, what? And I mean, they were just like, boo, boo, boo. And so by the time I left, I was exhausted. I didn't think I was so perfect for the first time. I took that disc home, I popped it in the computer, and I thought, oh, crap. I have got a long way to go. So I ended up studying my butt off. And I met with several of those people again throughout the process, and we did little one-on-ones. and I ended up getting promoted, #1 on that list. And it was in large part because of who I surrounded myself with, and that those people were willing to take the time to give me a piece of their mind, which is exactly what they gave me. Super important to surround yourself with people that will tell you the truth. I can't stress that enough. So I left Arizona, and I came here a year and a half ago and did not know one person. Christy and I moved out here, we didn't know a soul. And so that's tough, to leave what you built for 22 years, you know, especially focused on the last 6 years. And so we came here, and I don't know how much you know about law enforcement, but in law enforcement, there's not a lot of female police chiefs. There are, nationwide, less than 2% of chiefs are women. And so not a lot. Here in California, a little bit better. There are about 26 out of 335 females. And so when I got here, I got 26 emails from every one of those chiefs. Well, not 26 from everyone. I got one from each one. You know what I'm saying? And those emails said, hey, welcome to California. It's going to be tough. You're moving from a non-union state to a union state. You're going to have a lot of questions, a lot of issues. We've lived it. We've been through really tough times. And here's my personal cell phone number, every single one of them. And so I can't tell you what that did for me. And then immediately getting out into the community and meeting so many fantastic people and fantastic leaders. And Jerry's a prime example of that, of me reaching out and saying, I need help. And she said, I'm here. That's it. It was that simple. And this was created. So that's the importance in and the value in surrounding yourself with people that are going to help influence you in a positive way. So I was getting ready to promote to commander, and my sister had just died, and so I was going through a time of personal reflection. You do that, and I was asking myself, what are you doing? You know, why are you in law enforcement? Why are you a leader? What are you doing? Why do you want to be a commander? Why do you want to be responsible for that many more people and that much more stuff and that much more stress? Like, why in the world are you doing it? And so for the first time in my whole career, I figured out that I wanted to be a leader for the right reasons. I had been a sergeant for probably 7 years, totally for the wrong reasons. It was all about me, about money. It was about all the wrong reasons. I had been a lieutenant for the wrong reasons. And so finally, for the first time, I decided, I think I actually want to be a leader because I like people, kind of, a little. Not a lot. We're going to talk about that. And the change that came from that. So I want you to think about these things while we talk today. I want you to ask yourself, what kind of influence are you? And do you know? I mean, do you really, really know what kind of influence you are? Because odds are, has anyone told you if you're labeled? You know, I don't know if it happens in your organizations, but in law enforcement, if you do something dumb 10 years ago, they will label you and stick you on a shelf and never take you off. Does that happen in yours? And so that happens in law enforcement. And so I can't tell you how many people do not know that they're labeled. They don't know what people say about them behind their backs. And so they're looking in the mirror thinking, I'm amazing, and nobody's told them otherwise, but they're not going anywhere in their career, ever. And so do you know what kind of influence you are, honestly? And I'll tell you the way that I figured out all of my faults, which were many. What is your role and your responsibility in creating future leaders in your organization? Your role as a peer, your role as a subordinate, your role as a supervisor, and do you have a responsibility? You know, do you, if you're a peer and you see your peer walking toward the edge of the cliff and they're like, you know, down to the bottom of the cliff, do you have a responsibility in stopping that from happening? I mean, a human responsibility, probably. But is there a policy that says, hey, you have to go have a difficult conversation with Tom who's making terrible decisions and he's headed off the cliff? No, probably not. But do you have a role or responsibility in that? If you are a supervisor, ask yourself why. Like, why are you a leader? Are you a leader for the right reasons? Because I can tell you honestly, I wasn't for many, many years. And who is your peer group? So, you know, I had purposely created that for myself over the last 6 years or so. And it was very purposeful. It was very intentional, what I did. And so ask yourself that. Who are you hanging around? Who do you surround yourself with? And what kind of influence are they on you? And then, how do I create what I'm in need of? So we're going to talk about all of those kinds of things. So think about those throughout the conversation today. So this person, hopefully you all have this person in your organization, right? We're going to call this person Sunshine. I have this person. Sue Sanders is my admin assistant. And Sue, if you've ever met her, talked to her, you don't even have to meet her. You just have to talk to her on the phone. You two are smiling because you know that Sue is this person. She is so happy to be at work. She's on all the time, 100%. She is 100%. She's happy to be at work. She's happy to help anybody. She will stop what she's doing to help you do anything. She's like, hey, I'm gonna head out for coffee. What can I get you? Anything? Are you sure? You sure? I'll get you something. Or hey, you're working on that project. That's huge. It's congratulations. It's such a good project. You know, I got a little bit of time. I could take a tiny part of that and help you with that. If you need some help, let me know. She is that person. How, by show of hands, do you have those people in your organization? Sunshine people, right? If you could multiply those people by every person in your organization, can you imagine how awesome it would be to go to work every day? How productive your organizations would be if you had a room full of those people. So conversely, oops.
Here it comes.
Yeah, here it comes. Conversely, how many of you have that person? Yeah, and you all do, right? And it's funny that you can think of that person faster than the other. That's the power of branding. And branding's a whole separate class. We're going to touch a little bit on it, a little bit on branding. But that is the power of being labeled. That is the power of your brand and people knowing what to expect from you, either nothing or everything, right? And the people who give everything, what do they get? More work. They get more work. That's what they get. And the people who do very little get less. That is typically what happens in all of our organizations, which is terrible. So you have the Sunshine group, and you have this group over here. We'll call them the black hole or the darkness or the suck the life out of the company or whatever you want to call those people. And then you got this person who's in the middle, right? You get a new person that comes into your organization, and they're walking, and they're happy because they just got hired. They're so happy to get hired and get through the process and get a job. And so now they're heading down the road, and they're waiting for what? To be influenced. They're waiting for someone to influence them. And 70% of our people in our workforce is in the middle of the road. And about 12% are at the top, and the rest of them are the black hole at the bottom. And so if you see this person in your organization come in, and they start heading towards the wrong direction, right? Here they are headed off the cliff, or you're just going to be like, hey, I saw that Jerry just was hired, and she's totally heading down the wrong path. Oh my God, I'll bet you lunch she's fired in 6 months. You want to take the bet? Right? Are you that person? Or are you the person who is like, hey, Jerry, I saw that you're new to the company, and I think you're going to do amazing things, and do you introduce her to Sunshine? Purposely. Do you purposely, as a leader of your organization, assign the people who are Sunshine in your organization to new people so you can multiply that group and not multiply the other group? Because you want to make the other group as small as possible, right? So do you have a role or responsibility as a peer in having a conversation with that person, as a supervisor, as a subordinate? We'll talk about those. So these words, shared vision, shared goals, shared values, shared ambition, are those good things? Maybe. Does this group have shared ambition? Yeah, you know they do. My brother, I think about this. My brother's a drug addict. He has been a drug addict for as long as I can remember. And he's been clean a few times. Probably the longest he's been clean and stayed clean is maybe a year. And inevitably, every time that he falls off the wagon and starts using drugs, why is it? Because he started hanging around his old friends, right? We just had a lady who got out of jail. She was getting out of jail, and it just reinforced my thought on this. She was getting out of jail. She called our community action team officers, and she said, I'm getting out too soon. I'm not ready to get out. I need to stay in. If I get out, I'm going to go hang around my old friends, and I'm going to start right back where I was. And she's like, I need out of San Luis Obispo. So they ended up calling around. They found her a halfway house in San Francisco. that they could, so they got her out of town so she could spend a little more time away from that old influence, that old company that she hung out with. So it applies to all kinds of things, not just us and our organizations, but certainly it does apply to business, and it applies to our personal lives. So shared ambition, values, goals, those can be great things, but they can also be terrible things. So think about that. Now, you as a coworker, it takes a ton of courage, right, to go up to somebody and say, hey, I think you're headed down the wrong path. I've seen this, or you sound like super angry lately, or bitter, or your work's been suffering, or whatever. As a peer, I feel like I'm picking up the load. You go to your supervisor and say that, hey, I don't like Tommy. I feel like I'm doing all the work and Tommy's lazy. And then your supervisor has a responsibility to go have that difficult conversation. But do you as a peer have the courage to have that conversation? When I start thinking about this, and I start thinking, when was my first course correction, really, from a peer? And so I thought back to Cindy Davis. She was in the academy with me, and we got out of the academy, and I probably had maybe 4 or 5 months on. I just got out of training, and I was super competitive. I hated to be beat on any stats, and so I didn't eat lunch with anybody. I ate lunch in my car because I could eat in 5 minutes at a stoplight, and it gave me 25 minutes to go arrest somebody. And so not only did I, there's a problem. So not only did I not socialize with anybody, I rubbed it in their faces. So when I would go to the station, and I'd be writing my paper or whatever, and I wouldn't be talking to anybody because I wanted to get back out and arrest people, then I would say, damn, dude, have you even been at work this week? I haven't even heard you on the radio. Have you seen my stats? Look what I'm doing. You wish you were half as good as me. I was just rubbing everybody's nose in it. And I thought it was fine. I did not see a thing wrong with it. So Cindy pulls me aside one day, says, hey, Deanna, she's all, people think you're a, rhymes with which, starts with B. And I was like, what? Me? No, I'm super, have you looked in the mirror at me? I'm super funny. I'm sociable. I kill it every day at work. And she's like, right, there's that also. You stick that kind of in everybody's face all the time. And I'm like, right, to make them better. I'm doing it for them. I'm giving. I'm so giving. How can you not all see how giving I am of my talent, right? So she talked to me, and I had to think about it. And I was like, dang, maybe I should stop rubbing it in people's faces. Maybe I should. So I had lunch with people once a week, because it's about all I could handle, right? It's slow. It's a slow process. Change is not easy. And so, but she gave me my first course correction, and I thought about that, and I thought, she didn't have to. Cindy didn't have to talk to me, and what would have happened to me? Man, I would have kept right on, and people would have stuck a big label on me and stuck me on a shelf, and that would have been that. But Cindy had the courage to have a conversation with me, and I appreciate it. I texted her just the other day about that. I was looking through some old paperwork, and I saw a memo that I wrote when I was in the academy, and it said, dear sir, it was to my sergeant, Cindy and I stopped, Recruit Davis and I stopped to talk to a civilian. That will not happen again. And 3 towers. I had to run 3 fire towers and write a 100-word memo, or a 100-word memo to my sergeant about her and I stopping. So I said, you were a terrible influence. She started laughing, so anyway. So hard to have the conversation as a coworker, but super important. So now, think about you as a supervisor or your supervisor, how difficult that still is to have, right? It's a hard conversation to pull someone in and say, hey, you need to do this better. It's hard. And how many supervisors do we have that don't do it? That are friends with everybody? Because it's a lot easier to be liked. And it's hard, to be a good supervisor. So think about that. Me as a supervisor, I got a little bit better, not a lot. If you worked for me, if you were one of my 8 people, I owned you. I had you on a 5-year plan. I knew your schedules. You were, by darn, you were not going to walk off the cliff while you worked for me. It was not going to happen. I owned you. But if you were on my sister squad, I was like, dude, did you see so-and-so on so-and-so's squad? They're not my responsibility. My responsibility is these 8 people. not the whole organization. I was like, that's the chief's job. My job is these 8 people. What do you expect from me? I can only handle 8 people. I'm not responsible for your 8 people. Your guy just walked off the cliff. Shame on you. You're a terrible sergeant, but I'm awesome, right? I'm a great sergeant. Look at my 8 people. They're super productive. And we rub it in everybody's faces. So I was a little better, not a lot, but it was a little bit of progress. So super important, though, to have those conversations. And then to now, especially as a chief, to realize I am certainly not responsible. I am for the whole organization, but every single employee in the organization is responsible for the organization and the health of the organization and the happiness in the organization. And so if we all would take that to heart and take each other a little bit personally and each other's success and failure a little bit personal, I always tell cops, I find it crazy. Here we're willing to die for each other. Like literally. I will step in front of a car, I will take a bullet. Well, for any of you, actually. But especially for my brothers or sisters in blue, yet I will not tell you when you're screwing up. I find it crazy. Like I won't save your career, but I'll save your life. It doesn't make any sense. Now, think about this one. I think this is probably the hardest. It's you as a subordinate. How many of you as a subordinate have had a leader that you've disagreed with on some of the stuff they're doing and had the conversation with them? Couple. And how many of you have had that, and you're like, the leader's in here right now. So you're like, no, our organization is great. It's hard, but it's so necessary. I tell my people, you create me. You will shape me. You will create me. If you don't stick your toe in the water and test it by coming in and saying, Deanna, I think you're crazy. I think you're doing crazy stuff. And I said, you can say it just like that. You don't have to sugarcoat it. Like you could just say, I think you're crazy. I'll say why. And if you don't do it, though, I'm just going to keep trucking along, right? I'm just going to keep saying, oh my gosh, I must be doing great. Nobody has said anything, so it must be wonderful. It's a hard conversation to have. I had a assistant chief who was a big guy. He was probably 6'8", 250. He played football for UCLA before he became a police officer. So physically, he was gigantic. And he was intimidating in every way. And so I had put together a class for I was the chair of the diversity team, and so I had put together a diversity, civility class that all 1,200 people had to go through. And so he was sitting in a class one day. He didn't like part of it. I wasn't instructing it with somebody else. And so he said something, instead of waiting and telling the instructor personally, he said it in front of the whole class. He has tons of influence. He's an assistant chief in an organization. His influence is huge. So when he says, I think this is dumb, everybody in the class is like, we agree, we all think it's dumb, right? And so the instructor came to me and said, you need to have a conversation with him. And I was like, okay, scary. And so I fretted about it, and so I finally walked in the door, and he said, what's the matter? I said, I'm stressed out, dude. I said, I got to tell you something that is not great. It's something I think you screwed up, and I'm afraid to tell you. And he was, what else are you going to say? You should be. I'm about to yell at you. But I totally set it up for success. And so I told him, and he's like, tell me, what's up? And I said, you did this and blah, blah, blah. And, you have a lot of influence and so on and so forth. And he's like, all right, okay. And when I was walking out the door, he said, D. And I poked my head back in. He said, so basically you're telling me to shut the heck up. He didn't say heck. And I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. He's like, got it. Our relationship from that, this is the key. Our relationship skyrocketed. One, I knew I could tell him something difficult and I could disagree with him without getting killed. So important as a subordinate. And him as a leader, he knew that I had his best interest at heart, that I was willing to give him a course correction as a subordinate. And the trust that him and I developed was incredible. We ended up with a fantastic relationship. And he ended up being one of my better mentors. So really hard to have that conversation, but really, really necessary. You shape your leaders. You create us. Otherwise, we're just going to keep, doing a bunch of crazy stuff if nobody tells us otherwise. So now, how many of you are parents? How many of you had parents? Okay, thank you. So it went off about like I thought it would. I was like, well, that's about a medium kind of thing. So, so you as parents, how many of you question, if you have kids, how many of you question your role with your child? You don't. Do you? Well, if your child is walking off the cliff, that ain't going to happen, right? You're like, I birthed you. I spent 8 hours in labor for you, or 10 or 12, or I don't know how many. And you're not walking off the cliff. I own you. You are not walking off the cliff as long as I'm alive, right? And so think about if we took each other that personally in our organizations, how great that could be. If we took each other that personally and said, you know what, you're not going to fail on my watch. I'm not going to watch you fail. I'm going to tell you if I think that, if I hear something about you, I'm going to say, hey, I have a friend that what she does is if somebody comes up to try to talk to her about somebody in the organization and start rumors, she'll say, let me see your hands. Let's pray for them. And they're like, no, never mind. And so I think it's the funniest thing. I think that's like a great thing to stop rumors in your organization. So you as a parent, though, you don't question your role. How many of you had a parent, or how many of you said this to your kids? You're not hanging out with them, right? Everybody. Everybody has had a parent that has said that to them, right? Why? Because you know a bad influence when you see it, right? I was that kid. I was the kid your parents warned you about. I had my best friend in high school, Tricia, who is still my best friend, is a teacher in New Mexico, which is where we're from. And she came from a great family. I was a terrible kid. I got terrible grades. I was doing terrible stuff. I was definitely headed down the wrong path. And her parents said, Tricia, you're not hanging out with Deanna. Because they knew I was a bad influence, and I was. I would have drugged Tricia down if I could. And we did. We ended up hanging out and being friends anyway. And so it was a battle of these two strong influences. And I and Tricia did a couple things she should have never done. She's not proud of. I can't talk about. But ultimately, she won. She pulled me in the right direction. We ended up moving to Arizona, to Tucson. That's where her dad lived. And I had no ambition. I had no goals. I was like, whatever. I could work wherever and be fine. And so she filled out my college application. She filled out a Pell Grant. She's like, sign this, sign this, sign this. And I was like, what am I signing? She's like, we're starting school Monday. I was like, oh, great. And that was that. It's huge. That's an incredible influence. That is where good won out over the black hole. That could have definitely pulled her down, but she was way too strong of an influence. And still is, and is a great teacher, in part because of that. So think about, if we all took each other personally in our organizations, what that might do for us as a whole. So when I was getting ready to promote to commander, let me go one more. And I was going through that period of time where I was questioning a lot of stuff, and I was trying to figure out, what kind of influence am I, and why am I doing this? I went around, hi Jean, and I started asking, I went around and I talked to people and asked them what kind of influence I was. Hey, what is my label? And you know who I asked? I asked people that didn't like me. I knew who didn't like me. I mean, you know that. You know in your organization who doesn't like you, right? And so did I. And so I went to people that I knew I had wronged as a sergeant and a lieutenant, but I didn't care back then, honestly. And so I went to them and I said, tell me why you don't like me. Tell me what's, And so people said all kinds of things. And what I heard was a lot of this. I had a lot of good hard skills, great hard skills. Man, you're super competent, you're smart, you have great time management. I need to change the color of that. You have great vision, you can put a plan together, you have all these things. But what I didn't hear, and which is so critical, what I didn't hear is, hey, Deanna, you're great with people. You're a great people person. It's like, oh, that's too bad. And I didn't hear, I was like, that's your opinion, right? And so I didn't hear a lot of that. I'd never heard, man, you're super empathetic. No. I was like, don't cry in my office. Don't cry at work. If you are, go cry to somebody else. Not empathetic, right? I lacked it completely. And so, of course, I didn't hear anybody that said it. And then I was like, gosh, I didn't hear any of those things. And so that's a huge, right? Especially when you look in the mirror all the time and you see amazing. And you're like, yikes, maybe not so amazing. So this is like think about a wheel. And if you have spokes on a wheel, probably the most important spokes on your wheel are those things. It's people. That people make your organization, not stuff. I was super task-oriented, very task-driven. You give me a job, I would surgically get to it. And I would run over a lot of people to get there. And I did not care. So I was missing those things, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to be missing them. And so I started looking at other people, and I started saying, your puzzle, your piece of that puzzle fits, and I need that. You're so good with people. I need to get that from you. And so that's what started it, was my looking around and saying, who have I surrounded myself with? And who do I need to put in my life to get this? Because I'm missing this. And so this talking about brand, when we talk about brand and your label, and that you control that. You control what people say about you, really. But it's difficult to change. Once your brand is there, once you're labeled and stuck on a shelf, it's hard to change. But it's not impossible, and I know that because I did that. So what happened was I started to change, and I had to fake it. And I want to talk about that a little bit. But what ended up happening, once I made people more important than stuff, I started making relationships with people. And those relationships turned into trust. And trust does tons of things. Trust gives the benefit of the doubt. So you as a leader, you make a decision, and instead of people immediately saying, oh, she's taking us off in some crazy direction, they say, you know what, I know her, and I know she has the best interests of this organization at heart, and she's not going to do anything crazy. And they take a deep breath. Trust will take a pause. It's the same thing with us and the community and building that trust in the community. Is so that when we do get involved in a critical incident, we do get in an officer-involved shooting or something, the community will take a deep breath. And they'll just say, we're going to wait a second. And we're not going to pass judgment on the police officers because we know them and we trust them until we have all the facts, right? That's what trust does for you. And so trust is critically important because trust eventually will allow you to be honest with each other, right? And we talked about building a core group of truth tellers, people that will be honest with you even when it hurts. You're never ever going to change if everybody's going like this and shaking their head around you. If you have a whole room full of yes people, your organization is going to go nowhere. You have to have people that are willing to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? And you have to say, okay, let's hear it. Why? Right? So this was a critical turn for me in my organization was to build that kind of trust and to look deep inside. And so you decide what people are going to say about you, right? You really do decide. Martha Stewart didn't skip a beat. She went to prison. She went to prison. She didn't skip a beat, man. She people's hair. She came out looking as pretty as she did going in. She's like, boom, her brand, her market. She's worth more than she was before she went to prison. Prison was great for her company. You should all try it. I don't know. It could work. You know. So you control it. You control what is said about you, and you control your brand. So, I was going to tell you a story about, so let me go back to that, the puzzle piece, or I mean the other one, the wheel. So when I was going through that transition to try to get those people pieces put in me, it was hard. I started out, and I meant to bring it. I have a little hourglass timer, right? And so I have that on my desk, and people would come in, and I'd flip it over. I'd be like, hey, that's how long you have to talk. And when that's out, you're out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so efficient. I'm saving you time. I'm saving me time. Look, I'm giving. I'm such a giver, right? It's like, gosh. And so people were like, and I'm like, no, seriously, you wasted like 10 seconds. You got like 50 seconds left. You better hurry. And I was like, what? What is wrong? It's totally efficient. What's wrong with that, right? I missed it. I totally missed the boat. And then finally somebody came in and said, I don't know the sand timer, it's 60 seconds. I was like, I could give you an extra turn. And they're like, no, it probably like, you should probably just like get rid of it. I was like, really? And what? Like, how do I get rid of you? And they're like, well, you don't. You know, you talk to us. And I was like, ugh. And so I was like, and they're like, remember the pieces you're trying? And I was like, oh, right, okay. So I did. I got rid of it. And then I would be like this on my, I'd be like, talk. You can stay as long as you want. I can multitask. I will do this and listen to you at the whole, right? And then I went to, remember my assistant chief, the big guy? I went to his office one day to talk to him about something. And when I walked in, he turned his phone off and he pushed away from his computer and he said, what do you got going on? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, look at that. And so I talked and he listened the whole time. He didn't try to push me out the door. I was talking super fast because I'm like, look, I know you're busy. He's like, no, I'm good. I have all the time in the world for you. I was like, what? Because I know he's busy. I'm busy. He's 10 times busier. And so we talked. And when I left, I thought, I feel pretty good. I feel like I was important to him. I feel like everything I said, he listened to. I was like, gosh, I wonder how people feel when they come in my office. Probably opposite of that. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I have to stop doing that. And so I pushed away from the keyboard, but I could still see the computer. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to time out, and it's on a 3-minute timer. You've been in here 3 minutes. Please stop talking and get out of my office. And then I would reach over and hit the mouse when it would start to time out. Because that's like 15 seconds, right? You know what you can do in 15 seconds, right? And so eventually I stopped, and it took a while to actually listen and not be thinking of the million things I could do and wanting people to leave. And so then it happened. There was a day I was walking down the hall and I ran into someone and I said, you didn't finish telling me what happened to your cousin. And then I was like, what? I was like, it happened. And I'm telling you, from that day forward, my career, my influence, my level of influence on not just the 135 people that work for me, but the entire organization changed. The day that I really cared, even the days when I didn't really care, I just faked it, were helpful because people thought I cared. But boy, when I really did care, what a huge difference it made. And I wouldn't have gotten there had I not had people that told me the truth, you know, and said, you're a nightmare when it comes to people, right? So really, really important. So we all want to be part of something, right? We all want to connect. Nobody wants to be that little piece of the puzzle that's out there floating along. I was listening to NPR this morning on the way here, and they were talking about high school reunions and how, I guess, terrible they are. I had never been because I was a bully. I know that shocks you in high school. It's terrible. So I had never gone back because I'm on somebody's list, like in lipstick. They've written my name at the top of that list, and I'm like, yikes. So I've never gone to a high school reunion, so I don't know what it feels like. But apparently it's terrible for some people. And so this guy was on there talking, and he's like, I went through junior high, and then I got to high school, and I knew I was just on the outside. And I was like, oh, he's like my puzzle piece. Like being on the outside, right? Nobody likes it. It didn't feel good. He talked about it, and it didn't feel good to be on the outside. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to be a part of something bigger, right? Everybody wants to make change in their organization, in the world, right? So I look at this, and it reminds me that, you know, I don't want to be out there. I want to be part of that. It makes me happy to be a part of something and to make everybody be connected. So when I left Arizona, I kind of felt like that. I was like, man, I'm just out here floating out here by myself. I left all my friends and I don't know anybody. And then I got all those emails and I met all these wonderful people in the community, and I felt like I was part of something again, right? All my amazing people in the San Luis Obispo Police Department. So I felt like I was a part of something. And just because I left didn't mean the influence changed. I still call people when I'm like, hey, I need some advice. I'm doing this is happening. And they still call me. Last week I got 3 phone calls. One was from a friend who's a commander in Phoenix at Phoenix PD, and she says, hey, I need you to talk me off the ledge. She was having an issue with her chief. And then someone else, like their lieutenant in Tucson, she's like, I need some mentoring. She has a sergeant that was kind of giving her some hard problems. And so then somebody else called and said, hey, he's an assistant chief in Coeur d'Alene, and he said, I need help to navigate. I have a super hard conversation I need to have with my chief. And I was like, oh, I had one of those with our assistant chief. And I told him, I said, yeah, start out by saying, I'm scared to death to tell you this. I feel like you're going to kill me. It'll work great. He's like, oh, great. Okay, fantastic. So, so really important to be a part of that and to feel like you're connected with your people. So this is here's kind of how it happened. And I call it accidental influence because I didn't mean for it to really happen until I started looking back on it and saying, how did this happen? Where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That we are stronger together. One little puzzle piece, you look at that, you don't know what it is. You don't know it's a farmhouse. But when you put it all together and you're like, oh, look at what an awesome picture it is, how much stronger it is together. So it's the same thing with us in our organizations and when we take each other personally like that. So first, you have to recognize value in other people. So one, you have to recognize you have a lot of good stuff. You have a lot of good stuff. I'm missing those things, right? Maybe I need those things for me. And you have to look at yourself and say, man, look at all these things that I've accomplished and I've put together and I could give to you, right? So recognizing there's a lieutenant, my friend Diana, she's a lieutenant now, she was a sergeant at the time in Arizona, and her work product is phenomenal. I mean, it is just amazing. And we were a lot alike. She's very, very task-driven, but she pisses off people. And I was like, yikes, you could be the chief, like you could be amazing, your work product is unbelievable, but you're never going to make it further than sergeant because you piss everybody off. And so I was like, I've worked on my people skills, clearly, and I'm going to give that to you, look, and I'm going to mentor you. And so Diana and I ended up partnering, and it's a great story in influence for both of us. But you do have to recognize the value in other people. So you and them and them for you. You have to connect with like-minded people, right? A shared values, shared vision, shared goals, those kinds of things are really important for both sides, right? Good or bad. Those could be both good and bad. So you have to partner with people that are like-minded. If your aspirations are to promote or to have a lateral transfer and go somewhere else or do whatever, you have to look at people that are there currently, have been there in the past, and who want to go there. So look at those three groups and say, I need to pick somebody from each one of those areas, and I need to talk to, they're going to become my mentor, right? Whether they know it or not, I'm going to go up and I'm going to start with what? A compliment. I'm going to say, man, you were in motors, and you were amazing. You killed it. You were a totally good writer. You managed grants. You did, and so you give them a huge compliment. You say, I need some help. I want to go to traffic. And I think you could really help me. It'd only be a pretty terrible human being that would say, no, I know I'm amazing and I'm not going to help you. That would be pretty awful. You don't want that person as a mentor anyway. So, and then you have to build truth tellers. That's the most important thing. And that comes from trust. People aren't going to tell you the truth if they think you're going to kill them. You can't kill the messenger, right? You got to take it. You got to be in a place, an open place where somebody can say, here's the truth about you, and you gotta take it personal, and take it, because if you say, I'm not like that, that's it. That's the end of it. They're never ever going to talk to you again, and you're going to have that label, and you're not going to know it. You're going to go back to your life and never ever change. Somebody has to take ownership for the relationship. So as soon as I pick someone that I'm like, ooh, I need you to mentor me, I would take ownership of that relationship. And I would set up lunch, and I would set up time for us to communicate, and I would, if I knew they were speaking somewhere or doing something, I would go be there. So they saw me in the crowd, so they knew that I was involved, so, for all kinds of reasons. So someone in that has to take some ownership for it. You have to realize that, and truly this is true in our organizations, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Individually, great. We're great. I'm sure we all are. But you put us all together, and we are unbelievable. The synergy that is created by that, by a team working together, is really unstoppable. And your growth, when you surround yourself with people that care about you, is just, your potential can just be unbelievable. And you have to surround yourself with people that answer your questions and question your answers, right? Those are your truth tellers. So, yeah, we're getting pretty close. I'm going to end it with this story. I had a young man that worked for me when I was a sergeant, and I wasn't a great sergeant. We've already discussed that, so we don't have to beat a dead horse. So I wasn't a great sergeant, but he drugged me up and down that leadership ladder. I didn't know it. I didn't know it was happening at the time. I didn't know until years later when I was reading leadership books, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is written about me and Chris. And I was like, that guy, I hated that guy. I was like, he taught me all kinds of stuff. I didn't know it then. Then I was like, oh my God, you're such a pain in the neck. He still works for the Basic Police Department, and he's absolutely fantastic and very successful. But he was super driven, really, really dogmatic, and black and white, which was such a problem in policing, to be black and white. There's a ton of gray. And so we went up and down that. We started with mentoring and counseling and coaching and training and discipline, and back to the bottom. And mentoring and counseling and coaching and training and discipline over and over. I can't tell you how many times we went up and down that ladder. In the first year, we worked together. After that first year, I was like, oh, I've got to get away from that kid. He is driving me crazy. I didn't know. I was like, oh my God. If I was smart, I'd be like, I'm learning so much from you because you're such a nightmare of an employee. I should have looked at it like that and be like, oh my God, you're a giver. I should have been like, oh my God, Chris, you're a giver. But I was like, no, you're killing me. You take all my time. My other 7 people I don't even talk to because I spend it all on you, right? We all have those people. Think of them as a giver. If you can, it's hard. I know. And so I was like, I got to get away from that kid. So in Arizona, we had 4 districts, like 4 little cities. And so I was like, I'm going to bid to another district. So I bid to another district. Well, sergeants bid before officers. You know where I'm going with this? I was like, you followed me? What? I was like, you freaking, I did a complaint on you. And you followed me. I was like, I have to spend another year with you. Right. But it was great. It turned out to be one of the best things ever for me. And I used him as an example when I was testing for commander. One of the questions in the executive board was, what's the greatest accomplishment that you've had with this police department? And I said, my greatest accomplishment is Chris Adamczyk. Because he had sent me a letter, probably 6 years after I was his sergeant, and said, you saved my career. I owe everything to you for your shaping me, right? So that kind of influence, what? And I thought you were a nightmare, right? And so here's what Chris taught me. I looked at it later and I was like, all the things Chris gave me, which the bottom one is the most important, but Chris taught me to have a difficult conversation because he was such a difficult employee. I had many, many hard conversations with him that I had to have because I owned him. And he wasn't going to step off the cliff. Not while he worked for me, he wasn't. And so I had to own that. He taught me how to ask tough questions because he was always getting involved in crazy stuff. He taught me to make hard decisions. He taught me to be competent because he pushed the boundaries. I'm a Fourth Amendment expert. I'm only a Fourth Amendment expert because of him. I am not kidding. He was like, I'm going to kick this door in. I'm going to do this. I just searched this. I'd be reading reports, and I'm like, I'm not sure that's legal. I'm like, there's this thing called the Constitution. I should probably look at some of that. I was like, here I'm his sergeant, right? And if I give him bad advice, what does he do? Then he does bad stuff forever. So I was like, I have to be right. And I have to be smarter than him. I studied policy. I studied case law. I studied personnel rules because I had to do all kinds of different things to keep that kid on track. And I didn't know how much he was giving me, honestly. So he taught me all kinds of things. He taught me how not to take feedback. Fast story, I won't tell you the whole thing. He was in the locker room calling me names. And they weren't nice names. He wasn't like, Deanna's great, not like that. But other stuff, like bad stuff. And so I got wind of it, of course. And so, being the terrible sergeant I was, I called him in, and I was like, it was like we were in high school. I was like, I heard you've been calling me names. He's like, yeah, so? And I'm like, so? I'm so smart that I found the most obscure personnel policy that I could find, and I did a complaint on you, and now you're getting disciplined. Boom, right? That's how you don't take feedback, right? What I should have said is, hey, I heard you were saying some things about me in the locker room. Why? Tell me what's up. Why do you feel that way? Right now, I would hopefully do that now, but he did teach me how to not do it, so that was good. And the best part is he taught me how to watch something that you had a tiny bit of influence on, that you create, you shaped a little, and it grew into something absolutely beautiful. Like, that is the number one thing about being a leader, is that right there, is that kind of influence. So I'm going to leave it at that. And then if you have any questions, we got about 6-7 minutes left. All right. Thank you. So, some feedback or questions.
What was your most difficult conversation with him about?
It was all it wasn't all law related. He was super, like I said, he was super black and white. And so there was this one time where it was 2 o'clock in the morning. He's sitting behind a lady who's going down a residential street. And so she stops in the street because she lives there. And she doesn't know who's behind her, and she's scared, right? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. She just got off work. And so she pulls over on the side of the road. The sidewalk was the kind that had a dip on it, so it wasn't, just a square. So she pulls over onto the sidewalk a little so he would go around. Well, he doesn't. He lights her up for driving on the sidewalk. And because she wants to pull into her driveway without the car behind her. And so he writes her a ticket for driving on a sidewalk. And she's like, I was just trying to get over so you could go around me. I didn't know who you were. And he's like, but you drove on the sidewalk. That's a violation of, and so trying to talk to him, I was like, seriously? And he's like, no, it's the law. Read it. It's the law. I was like, about 1,000 of those conversations. Yeah.
What was the okay to expect greatness?
The okay to expect greatness is that I expected great things from my people. Because I was competitive, right? And I did not like any other squad beating our squad in anything. And so I expected greatness from them. Somebody put a book together called WWDD, which is what would Deanna do? Because I assigned them homework in briefing, like I made them do briefing training. I was crazy. I was like crazy. My hair was on fire. So I expected greatness from them. And I did learn, like probably one of my greater lessons was, you get what you accept, not what you expect. So you can have great expectations, but if you accept less, you will get less. And so I had great expectations of them, but it was also good for them to expect me to be great. And I should be great. Well, I shouldn't be their leader. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So how about feedback for my talk in Phoenix that I'm going to be having in a couple weeks? What do you think?
You did excellently. Yeah.
Thank you.
This was a great presentation.
Thanks.
Can you get a clicker?
Oh, yes. It's on my phone. Well, I have it on my phone as a clicker. But yes,
I'm helping you.
You're a giver. No, you're right, so I don't have to walk over the podium. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
You already got color on one slide.
Mary? Yeah, the color, I noticed that.
One thing I really liked about what you said is that you told us about your exterior, how you grew up, but the hardest thing is you told us you became vulnerable, and that's what people don't want to show other people, is I'm vulnerable. And so you showed that, and I think that gives us, as the audience, a lot different perspective of like someone who's in charge, but also says, I was vulnerable to criticism, I was vulnerable to having to fit in and all those things.
Yeah.
But you did it, and you still have the role that you have.
Yeah.
So it's a super great lesson, in my opinion, also to talk to high schoolers about, because they're always feeling left out. And if they could learn that super early instead of having to wait till we're at a certain age, it's awesome.
Right.
I'm saying take this and also put it in high school somewhere.
I am talking to Pacific Beach High School. It's an alternative high school, so kids that are having a kind of rough time. I'm talking to them next week on this topic. So thanks, Mary. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you just adjust? How about you just adjust my schedule for me, Mary? Thank you. It's a women's leadership conference for law enforcement in Arizona in September, and then I just got asked to do it for women leaders in law enforcement in Monterey in November, and it's about 700 women. So just women across the state in law enforcement. Yeah. So exciting.
Yeah, because you told that story about why it was bad that you and the other recruit did something. I'm like, oh, that must be bad.
Yeah, you can't do anything. It was bad. You can't talk to people? No, you can't. You have to run everywhere. You can't walk. And so I was going back looking at all my old memos from the academy. I was in the most trouble. I got voted least likely to succeed in the academy. So if you can believe that. So I know, right? What? Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I was in all. I ran 50. How many did I count? A tower run is 7 stories up and back. And I ran 50 of those. I ran the most in my academy. And I wrote the most memos for getting in trouble all the time. I was in trouble. I was bad. I was terrible. Anything else? I cannot thank you enough for helping me run through this, for giving me some feedback, for being a great audience. Thank you, Jerry, for hosting. I appreciate it a ton. Yeah, good. All right, super. Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks. All right.